Well, hello, my name is Jim Royal. I am a huge Beatles and Elvis Presley fan and basically classic rock in general. So if you haven't already, please subscribe to my channel. Also, if you could do a thumbs up, that's always most appreciated. Feel free to leave comments. I always do my best to try to respond in a timely manner, and I always enjoy hearing what you have to say. Today I wanted to talk about what I would say is a forgotten Beatle album. It is an album that is no longer made, and I thought that maybe some of you would be interested in it. I am talking about a compilation that came out of previously released material. So there's nothing new here, but I think just as far as a nice record, this is would be a nice purchase, especially if you're a huge Beatles fan. What I'm talking about here is the Beatles Rock and Roll Music. This was a double album that came out back in 1976. It has 28 songs on it. I believe about 12 covers on there, cover versions of songs. But it's an excellent. It's the Beatles rocking out, and it's just nice, really good. This was released in that year, or bicentennial. And what's cool about it, surprisingly, this album did very well for an album of previously released material. It made it up to #2 on top of the Billboard charts. Okay, it was kept off the #1 spot from Paul McCartney and Wings. Wings had an album called Wings at the Speed of Sound at that time, and they were also, Paul was coming to America here after 10 years. So really big deal for him. And also, you know, Beatles nostalgia, reunion talk was in the air. This was probably the closest that in the press and what people were seeing that the Beatles might be getting back together, or it could be a possibility in the future. John and Paul were getting along really well and actually were hanging out from time to time. So, you know, this album had a lot going for it, and had some nice material on here. Also, before I talk about the album, I'm going to show you a single that was released, and this is Got to Get You Into My Life. And the B-side was, so Got to Get You Into My Life was originally from Revolver. It was a 10-year-old song. And then you had Helter Skelter, which was from the White Album. Well, this climbed all the way up to the US charts, up to the #7 position. That is incredible. I'll show you the 45. I love that vintage mid-70s Capitol look, that orange. I really like that. Okay. So I'm going to tell you what's on it first. And this was supervised and produced by George Martin, the Beatle producer. That's also good to know. So what you have on here is you have Twist and Shout. I Saw Her Standing There. You Can't Do That. I Want to Be Your Man. Nice Ringo tune. I Call Your Name. Boys. You got Ringo again on there. Long Tall Sally. You got Rock and Roll Music. Slow Down. Kansas City. Money, That's What I Want. You got Bad Boy. That's always been a favorite of mine. Matchbox. Roll Over Beethoven. So you got George on there. Dizzy Miss Lizzie. Oh, I just love that song. Anytime at All. Drive My Car. Everybody's Trying to Be My Baby. The Night Before. You have a debut of a song called I'm Down as far as an album. That was the B-side to Help. You have Revolution. And then finally on the 4th side, you have Back in the USSR, Helter Skelter, Taxman, Got to Get You Into My Life, Hey Bulldog, Birthday, and finally Get Back. Now what the British did is the British released a different single. They released Back in the USSR with Twist and Shout, and that made it up to #19 on the charts. And their version, which is this version, the LP made it up to #11 on the UK charts. So really not bad for, you know, previously released material. There were some concerns about this album there was some concerns about the 50s nostalgia look about it. What was going on in the about the mid-70s, there was a big 50s nostalgia kick here in America especially. A couple years prior to that, I believe it was 73, American Graffiti, popular movie, came out, and it had a wonderful soundtrack of songs from the 50s and early 60s. Also, here I remember there was a very popular TV show, a sitcom on ABC called Happy Days. And that was set in Milwaukee with the Cunningham family. You had, you know, Potsy and you had Richard Cunningham, but especially you had the Fonz with his nice cool leather jacket. He would sit there like that. He would do you know, there would be famous sayings from that show like "sit on it," and he was known to, like, if he wanted to listen to music, he would go up to the jukebox, just tap it, and it would just come on. Everybody else would have to put money in it, but he just had the magic touch. So that was the other thing, and the way that Capitol marketed this, I'm going to show this to you. It's a nice double album, nice gatefold. So there's a lot of 50s on here. Besides the neon lights, you've got, what else do you got here? You got a jukebox on here. Let's see, I'm going to make sure I have all this. You have a jukebox, you have a drive-in, you know, movie theater, drive-in. You know, drive-ins were really popular. You have Marilyn Monroe right there. Like, you know, they're watching a movie with her on it. You also have ice cream. You have a 57 Chevy. You have a cheeseburger. I mean, how Americana can you get? And you've got a glass of Coca-Cola with a straw, I might add. So, and the thing about the Beatles, they might have had influences from the 50s, no doubt, of course they did, but they were a 60s band. And you had Ringo Starr, he complained to Rolling Stone magazine, and basically, you know, he says it made us look cheap. He's referring to this cover, and we were never cheap. All that Coca-Cola and cars with big fins was the 50s. You had John Lennon wrote an angry letter to Capitol Records. And he had wanted, actually, what he had says is he says, it looks like a Monkees reject, the cover. Now the Monkees were a band that were assembled to be on a TV show here in America, and they ended up being a great bunch of musicians, but they were actors. And they had a band of people that would sometimes do the recordings, and then they would put their vocals on it. Now, later they would do their own music too. And it was kind of like in the style of A Hard Day's Night. So it was kind of like meant to mean as a second-rate type thing. John had actually wanted photos of the Beatles from the Hamburg days. You know, taken like from Astrid Kirchner, their friend, or Jürgen Vollmer. He had also offered to design the record cover and was just flatly denied. Okay. I want to talk about George Martin a little bit and what he had, his involvement with this. The president of Capitol Records, Bhaskar Menon, wanted George Martin to take a look at the songs, and he wanted him to approve what they had planned to use. George was not happy with, you know, going back and looking at some of these songs. Some of these earlier songs were two-track mono recordings, and Capitol wanted him to transfer them to stereo. So he felt that in order to do that, what he would have to do is remix these songs, and that's what he did. He basically redid them for every song. What he did in the process, though, at least what I've read, is he reversed the left and the right channels, and then slightly narrowing the stereo on some of the songs. So what I mean by that is, you know, when you listen to Beatle recordings, you hear stuff some music, maybe a vocal in the left speaker, and then you hear something in the right. Well, that was changed a little bit. And in fact, what I think is really cool about this is the UK version of it. The UK, the EMI, the parent company in the UK, they flatly refuse to use these Martin mixes, is what I would call them. Because the Beatles had basically said that if there are any reissues in the future, we want the original sound recordings the way that they were. We don't want anything touched. So if you were to buy this, you would actually get the regular versions. But if you buy the American, let me show you that. This one, you're going to get the Martin mixes. Now in 1980, in October of 1980, they would end up reissuing it, these in separate volumes. But let me show you the US version, the record, okay? Again, the 50s nostalgia. You've got the Coca-Cola with the straw. Okay? Let me show you this too a little bit better. And there was also more controversy with the cover, with the fingers. You got a guy holding the record, and some people didn't like that either. So that's that. This is volume 2 of the 1980 version of it. This was more like a budget, I would say a budget version of it. It was a little cheaper to get, and I remember as a boy growing up, and I would see these records quite a bit. Let me show you the British version from 1976, the British album cover, the record. Okay, and then what happened was you had in 1980, what they did is they changed that cover, and they had a picture of the Beatles from 1964. Okay, around that time, and you can tell it with John Lennon's hat there. It gives it away for me. And then in the background, I don't know if it might be hard to see, but you can see people in the background there that are back there. All right, so that to me looks like that's how that was. But that was a photograph, I believe, and then superimposed. Well, on the Beatles music, on the UK Music for Pleasure, which was a smaller label from EMI, what they did is they had that photo, and then they didn't have the background. Okay, and then I think this is really cool. I wanted to show this. This is the Music for Pleasure label. And the inner sleeve, I think, is kind of cool too. I've got a lot of stuff I'm showing you. Okay, it's talking about how to care for your record. And then lastly, from the 1980 release, you've got the green label for Capitol. So I really want to thank you for watching. You know, I do definitely recommend you picking this up, because this is just a nice piece of Beatles history. It's an album that will probably never, you know, be reissued, and it's a nice album. It really is. It's a nice, nice piece of history. So thank you very much for watching my video, and you take care. All right, bye.